In this video, we're going to go through more advanced tips to help you think more strategically for the product sense, product strategy questions like, what would you build for blank? Hey guys, I'm Diana and I'm a senior product manager at a large tech company based in Silicon Valley, California. And one of the main struggles that I see in people answering product strategy questions is a struggle to think deeply about the problem space. Most of them will go through the 4-part framework of mission, user segmentation, pain points, and solutions, so they'll do that fine, but they'll struggle to think deeply in each of the sections, so it makes it seem like they're going through the motions rather than thinking about the actual problem space. And a lot of people say it's because they haven't experienced the prompt that the interviewer might have asked them about. So in this video, we're going to give you some tips that'll help you think deeply about the problem space, even if you had not experienced it before. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover 2 things. The first, we're going to go over the product sense framework and help you understand what are the objectives of each section and how does this translate into what you would do on the job. So this might help you think, well, as a product manager, how would I solve this type of problem in my own day-to-day? And second, we'll cover the tips on how you can think deeply in each of these sections. So let's dive into the first part of the product sense framework, which is answering the question, why should we build this? And here, the objective is to get the interviewer excited about the problem space that you're building for. Because think about it, how does this translate into the job? Well, as a product manager, if you're assigned a problem space, you probably have to first educate, whether it's leadership or your organization or your core team, about the problems in this space. And then you'll want to get them excited to invest a bunch of resources and a bunch of dollars into the space. So how you might think about this is, think about it as an investor pitch, or think about this as pitching the CEO of the company that you're interviewing for. So if that's the case, what might you cover? Well, one of the first things we talked about educating your audience on the problem space is to talk about trends, market gaps, and any opportunities that might present itself. And here, this is hugely important because if you want to persuade your audience that they should do something or that this space is important, you want to get them in the same context. For example, if I was asked about antique buying, maybe the average person wouldn't think much of the industry. But if I had some information to say, wow, one of the biggest trends in retail is people really like buying old stuff versus new stuff. One, because of the whole recycling or climate change concept where people want to help the planet by buying used goods. So that could be something that the average person might not know. And if you share that with them, they'd better understand why we should be investing in a space that might seem not the sexiest. So when we're talking about investor pitches, another thing that comes to mind often is talking about the size of the market. So how many times have you heard in one of these pitches, oh, this is a $2 billion opportunity, or this is a 200 million people problem? Enumerating how big the space is can show your audience, or your leadership in this case, why this is such a big opportunity to invest your dollars into. Because think about it, these companies want to make sure they're investing in something that's hugely impactful, that are going to get them some ROI, return on investment. Third is aligning it to the company's mission that you're being asked about. So here on the job, as the product manager, you'll have to help your leadership understand why building in this space is aligned with what they're trying to accomplish as a whole. Because if it's totally not aligned, they're going to be like, well, why are we doing this? This is not a goal of ours. And you'll also want to talk about strengths that the company can leverage. So a lot of the times, sure, there might be a really sexy space. Someone might ask, well, why is this important for us to build? What if we don't have the strengths to build in this space? Are we the best? And here, many companies have gotten really successful by leveraging their strengths and adding on to their strengths versus spending all their time covering their weaknesses. And the last element of this section of why should we build this is thinking about how is this going to benefit the company? And this is one of the most important ones that people forget. So sure, you're being asked to solve a people problem, but at the end of the day, a company will have to build it. And if it's not benefiting the company in some way, whether that's getting them new users or helping them grow revenues or helping them expand to a new space, then why would the company build it? So this is how you think more strategically in this section. Now let's talk about the second section of the product sense question, user segmentation. And here your objective is to come up with user segments where their problems are uniquely different and that the user segments are mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, or MECE. Why? Because on the job, you're going to have to define who your target users that you want to build for. So you might consider prioritizing the early adopters, or you might go straight for the mass majority to build for. So here it's important to prioritize because we have limited resources as a company and we need to keep focused on starting with one group to build for. So how do you even come up with some user segments? So here the exercise that I tell the people that I work with when preparing for interviews is to think about really concrete examples related to the topic. So for example, if we're talking about the grocery shopping experience, you'll want to ask yourself, the last time I went to the grocery store, what were some of the personas that I saw there? For me, the first thing that comes to mind is seeing parents with their children there. So that starts off my brainstorm. And then how do you get it to be mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive? I then start thinking about buckets and maybe opposites. So if there's the case of families, then I start thinking about, okay, there's also single people who are not married and have kids, and then there are couples who are not married yet. And you see how that's definitely mutually exclusive, because if you're single, you're also not married. And our criteria that we talked about, where there are distinctive needs, that also presents itself to be true, because a family or parents are feeding a mouth of 5 people, versus a single person might purchase less food because they're eating out more often. Here, it's starting out with very concrete examples to help you brainstorm. So another way I like to think about this, and here I share this in a previous video, is thinking about who are the least frequent users and who are the most frequent users of this space. So let's say grocery shopping. And here you want to come up with specific personas. So if I'm thinking about the most frequent shoppers, that again leads me to realize, oh, well, families probably have to go shopping once a week at the very least to get fresh produce, because they also have to feed, again, 3 to 5 mouths. And then you might brainstorm other personas for the least frequent, are those who are probably ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash every day. And a lot of these people probably tend to be single because they can afford it. But here's how you sort of finagle the art of user segmentation, because it really is an art versus a science. And here you don't have to strive to be perfect, but strive to be mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, where you're covering, let's say, 80% of the population versus 100% of the population. Other ways people think about user segments is motivation or use cases. So for the grocery shopping experience, someone that I was working with in preparing them for the product interviews had talked about use cases like someone who is going to the grocery store for a quick pick up and go to buy stuff for a picnic. Another use case was people buying for their family to cook for the week. So that could be another way to slice and dice it, but sometimes it's not as mutually exclusive as the least frequent versus most frequent dichotomy. The one that people default to the most is life stages. And that one is definitely mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, but it doesn't hit the first criteria of people having distinct needs. Because sometimes for certain topics, someone that's 50 versus someone that's 20 might not have very distinctive needs. And then once you come up with the user segments, how might you prioritize? And here the tip is to leverage objective criteria versus subjective. Why? Because subjective might be harder to prove and to argue. For example, a subjective criteria is, oh, I'll choose this user segment because they have more needs. Well, you might think they have more needs, but I might not think they have more needs. Versus an objective criteria, such as what is the size of this population? Or what is their frequency of using this type of product? Maybe what is their willingness to spend or their disposable income? These are things where I might be able to get factual data on in order to prove that a certain user segment optimizes on these criteria. Has this video been helpful so far? If so, make sure to like the video and share this with someone else that's preparing for the product interviews. And we're also thinking about doing a similar advanced video like this for product execution. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the video when we get it live. So third section in the product sense question are pain points. Here, your objective is to empathize and be able to come up with 4 to 6 pain points. How does this translate on the job? Well, as a product manager, we're constantly doing user research on the people that we're trying to build for. And hence, we're interviewing these people, asking about their needs. And here the tip is, the more specific your pain point, the more differentiated your solution will end up being. So for example, if we go back to the antique buying one, if the pain point that you're prioritizing is it's hard to search for antique stores, well, the solution you're going to come up with is probably let's create a directory of antique stores and allow people to search based on where they're located, versus if you focus on a more specific pain point with the antique buying journey, which might be negotiating with the antique seller, which is a struggle. Sometimes I might value a product much more differently if there's not an actual price tag on it. So here the solutions you might come up with might end up being more interesting than a directory. But also be careful not to have the pain point be too granular, because sometimes that might push you into the zone of coming up with a feature rather than a product. So you don't want solutions that say you're going to build a button to do X. That's way too granular. So here, people struggle to come up with pain points because it might be hard to empathize on certain topics. And even for topics that they are able to empathize on, they're scared to think of their own experience because they think that might bias their answer too much. So how do you become more empathetic? So if you want to come up with deeper pain points, I actually highly suggest you to use your experiences. But use your experiences that you think is generalizable to the population. So here, I like to think of the 3 spheres of empathy. The first sphere starts with asking yourself about your personal experience. When was the last time you did X? And thinking deeply about that experience and that process from beginning to the end. The second sphere, let's say you had never experienced this personally. Then you would think about, well, are there any friends or family that have experienced this and told me about it? Or have you seen something about this experience on TV? Use that to recall what were their struggles when talking to you about it. And the third sphere of empathy is visualize yourself in that experience and think, what would I need to do from the beginning to the end to accomplish this thing? And that's going to force you into very concrete parts of the experience to then figure out a user journey and then some pain points. So it's basically putting yourself in someone else's shoes and asking, what next? What next? Till you get to the very end. You'll first start off with the user journey, which is what is the process from beginning to end to accomplish that thing. And then you go deep into each phase of the user journey to ask what sucks or what was something that was frustrating in this experience. And trust me, even if you haven't experienced it yourself, you'd be able to come up with some ideas on what are just general annoyances that might occur when you're trying to accomplish something. And how do you prioritize here? The prioritization criteria here is a bit more subjective than the one we talked about in user segmentation. So some criteria that are going to help you prioritize are the pain level. Are there existing solutions out there for solving this pain? What is the size of the targeted users that are experiencing this pain? And which of these pain points are leveraging the company's strengths that they are advantageously positioned to solve? Here you want to choose just 2 or 3 of those criteria and don't use all of them because that will make it a really, really long analysis. Do you have other strategies that you've used in tackling product sense, product strategy questions that has worked really well? Or are there other things that you struggle with in this question? Comment below and let me know what they are, and they could be a great topic for the next video. And the last and final portion is the solution section. And here the objective is to come up with solutions that solve the pain point that you were talking about and make sure your solutions isn't something that already exists in the market. And how does this apply on the job? Well, when you're asked to solve for a problem space, you and your team probably have to brainstorm some solutions once you understand what the pain points are. One of the most common problems people have here is being solution-led versus problem-led. So a lot of the candidates that I've interviewed, in the first 5 minutes of the prompt being asked, they already have a solution in mind and they structure the whole question to get to that solution. And that'll be fairly obvious. And that is probably one of the largest dangers of developing products, when you're not focused on your users' pain points, but you're focused on your own solutions that you like. And the other struggle is people come up with solutions that already exists. So what are some strategies to help you think of more creative solutions in this section? So think about the company's strengths that you're being asked about to build this product for. So that's going to make it a really compelling answer if you can take in their strengths to come up with a solution. Another strategy in developing creative solutions is to combine different technologies and trends. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to use AR/VR to solve this problem, think, how am I going to use AR/VR and social to solve for this problem? So this combining and remixing is going to ensure that you're going to come up with a more interesting solution than the average population. So the tips we went over today are more advanced tips compared to the other product sense videos that I came up with. But if you want to see the other 2 videos and you haven't caught it yet, I'm going to share them here so that you can easily watch them. See you guys in the next video.